Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Overseas Famous podcast. We've been on hiatus for a while, doing some studio work, building a studio up, and trying to get things going on that end. But we are here today with a great episode. Andrew Petcash, who is a enormous wealth of knowledge, played college basketball at Boston University, now runs Profluence, which is a website and podcast and blog dedicated to athletes and the athletic world and investing in athletes and how athletes invest. I'm a huge fan of his because I've been following his stuff, and we are very excited to have him on the show. So Andrew, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome.
Kevin, thanks for having me, and appreciate the kind words to get going.
So the biggest thing that I feel like that sets entrepreneurs from the rest is when you have that athletic background. It's so important because we learn so much about the athletic process from the other side. And then you obviously learned that. So tell us a little bit about your background in athletics and how that led to your role as this athlete investment expert that you are currently.
Yeah, no, so I guess it kind of goes back to really the high school and the college recruiting process. And I created a whole mess out of that. I actually committed to Army West Point my junior year. And then on signing day, the coach called me and I was like, I don't want to go here anymore. Just being, the dumb 17, 18-year-old kid. And then had to go through the recruiting process having lost like all 8 of my Division I offers. Was about to go to prep school. BU calls me, a kid, he got kicked off the team or whatever. Like, hey, I know we offered you for like next year, which would have been my post grad year, but we want you to come now. And I was like, you know what? I was normally going to be the class of 2017 anyway. So I just went there, played at BU for 4 years. And actually our junior year, we won March Madness, but it was the COVID year. So that really sucked. But that's kind of actually where it all starts, is I just had so much free time. I was at home. Normally you're at school the whole year. And me and my teammates, we just started talking about just finances, and the stock market was going crazy at the time. So we started putting money in, and I had read books and watched YouTubes and all this stuff. And just started sharing, like, not just financial stuff, but started using athletes to learn myself. And then also just kind of teach some of my teammates, like, hey, here's what like venture capital is like, and here's how LeBron does it, or KD, or whoever. And I saw like it really stuck and resonated. And that's where I wanted to go with it on social media. And then it just keeps going to the next layer. But I know I kind of dodged your question a little bit, but
No.
yeah, I mean, the entrepreneurship and athletics and how much it teaches you is everything, because for me, they tied together and it built off my next career. And I'm still in sports because of entrepreneurship, but I'm interested in entrepreneurship through sports. So like to me, they're like the same thing. They're both a game, and the goal of the game is to win. But obviously there's different end results, different rules, strategies, but it all comes down to really people, teammates, and that stuff at the end of the day.
It is really a paradox of just everything kind of coming together. You talked a little bit about that. And I say this all the time, and I don't know how to change things. And trust me, I have a daughter, and I coach her AAU team for some ungodly reason. But when I look at how like youth sports are going and how college is going, and just how little knowledge there is, that is one thing when you have like a good support system. But like you said, you're 17 years old, 16, 17 years old, and making a decision that's going to impact the rest of your future life. I always thought that was wild, because really where you go to college influences so much. I mean, even just playing, I remember playing against guys who were playing at Duke, and I'm like, oh, I'm actually better than them, but they had Duke on their name. I'm like, shit, if I had this knowledge then, I probably would have gone to prep school and developed a little more and then gotten better.
Right.
But it is crazy to give those decisions. And you do so much with like NIL and how the NIL market is working. And you became an expert in NIL when it really was up and coming. So take us through that process. You talked a little bit about those COVID years, and then that's when NIL really started becoming a thing. How did you start getting involved in that particular venture?
Yeah, so that was another big life decision. It was come back to BU for my 5th year in play, go to Europe and go that route, or just kind of jump into the entrepreneurship route because I had a background in finance and commercial real estate from BU, so a good degree, but all my job offers were like analyst roles at big real estate firms in Boston or, wealth management or Wall Street stuff in New York. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to go do that corporate thing. And so with NIL coming, I was like, hey, I was just an athlete. I just learned all this stuff about not only athletes and what they're doing in business, but also just about entrepreneurship, finance, investing in general. Let me just go try to do something. And so I just started putting on Twitter, and then it led to like LinkedIn, then it was like newsletter, then it was like a website. And the NIL piece is really like the glue of all of it. And I say this because NIL is not new. Pro athletes have had it forever. It's just new to college athletes and youth athletes. And to me, coming from and teaching my teammates in college, I was like, I have to be a voice in this because I know there's going to be lawyers and I know there's going to be these random people that pop up and say they think they know everything about NIL. And I was like, but I actually lived it as the athlete and I like studied it. I want to be the one putting my voice. I have a unique perspective. I can, when you're 21, you don't have too many things you can be like an expert in. I was like, I think this is one of those closest things, and just started putting stuff out there. And some people resonated with it, some didn't, but for the most part, people did, and that's kind of how it went in the NIL space, which to me is one of the greatest things ever because now it's bringing this financial education and literacy down to college and high school, where the only reason I learned it is because we had so much free time and we were bored. Otherwise, I would have got out of college and had no clue.
It is wild how, and we talk all the time. I mean, you hear athletes talk about like they didn't teach us this in high school, and there's so much weird stuff that you're doing in high school that you're like, is this really going to matter? But having something where this NIL starts coming down, you actually have to become financially responsible at a young age, which I think is incredible. A lot of people look at it as a danger, but people are going to screw up regardless of whatever happens. So having that ability to at least teach these young athletes that at a young age, I think is incredibly beneficial. I know people, disagree, but I think it's a great thing. And when we talk about like the pro athletes have had it for a while, I always look at like the overseas athlete and that overseas athlete having to find that NIL deal, like that name, image, likeness, because when you go overseas, it's like season to season and you're just kind of like, hey, how do I get this opportunity? So like, but when you look at an overseas athlete, and obviously there's guys who have been successful, but when you look at an overseas athlete, how do you think they could benefit by, utilizing their name, image, and likeness? Do you think that a foreign market could be something that would really benefit by having American athletes represent them?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm actually glad I didn't bring up this point earlier because now it will actually be perfect for this segment. But so one of my best friends, also my teammate at Boston University, Suk Matan, so his parents are both from India and he was born here in the States. And so he won Patriot League Player of the Year like that 5th year when I didn't come back, but he went and stayed. And now he played last year in Netherlands and Croatia or Czech, somewhere. He transferred mid-season. And I always said to him, you need to be leveraging your, Indian background to your benefit. And he was always like, but I'm born in America. And I'm like, but your parents are like from India. You spent time in India, leverage that. And so he's kind of like created this aura of being like one of the best Indian basketball players in the world and being 7 foot tall. And there's this Instagram account called Brown Ballers or something, and he's always commenting on it and he's always like engaged, and they've featured him and he's grown this huge account. And then I was like, you got to create a deck for yourself. So I helped him create like a sponsorship deck where it's just like, I'm Suk Matan. I'm one of the best Indian basketball players. Here's like me featured in Brown Ballers. Here's me playing on 3-on-3, Patriot Player of the Year. Here's my stats, blah, 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 blah. I'm looking for brands that do this. And I was like, yo, you want shoe sponsors or whatever? So he started sending it to like India, like Puma India, Adidas India, all that stuff. And we actually got him a few things. Now, his is kind of an outlier example because it's just like so perfect. But the thing is, like, he didn't even see it. So to me, it's always like, what is that separator for you? For him, it was leveraging that and taking advantage of the 1.4 billion people in India and saying, yo, say you're like one of the best Indian basketball players in the world. Who cares? Like you are. Yeah. Like fully embrace that. Even though you were born here in America, like you're still really, Indian. And so that's worked out great for him to maximize his NIL. But also, like, there's just other people that have unique stories, and maybe they transferred a bunch in college, or maybe they like, I don't know, they like to travel, or they like dogs, or people just like to see people's lives. And to me, it's like, show that, right? Suk showed the Indian side. Other people could show just living your life as a European basketball player, Australian basketball player, whatever. And so to me, it's like finding those things that make you unique, whether you're born with them, like Suk was being Indian, or you self-create them, whatever that is. Maybe it's your interests or hobbies or whatever. And make it around basketball at the end of the day. Like, that's a big piece of who
Mhm.
you are. Like, don't forget to incorporate that.
No, I think that's a great example. I mean, you talked about it being an outlier, but it is a really good example of how, you can leverage yourself. And we're talking with a lot of athletes about, their branding and not only how you really reach out now while you're a name, because when you come home, you're no longer a name. So you can utilize that and leverage that into something post-career. But with all of the stuff going on, there's so many technologies, so many opportunities presented in the investment realm for athletes. And if you're advising an athlete or you're talking to an athlete, how would you have them? What are some ventures that you would be like, okay, this is a way to invest your money wisely for the future, so that you don't have to worry about finances as you continue down the road?
Yeah, I think you got to go the traditional route at first to start, like take a backwards education. Like, you got to look into stocks and some of the just ETFs and passive stuff like that. I think it's always a great place because it's high level, way less risky. Someone else is picking all those companies managing it. And then I think the real learning comes in when you go, okay, I want to look at some private companies or stuff like that. And so where I've approached it, or I've helped people approach it, athletes particularly, is to say, okay, what are you interested in, right? Like, what do you think you know a lot about? And that's why you see a lot of athletes invest in fitness products or consumer or health and wellness or beverages. It's like they know that this tastes good, or, this product helps me jump higher. Or, there's a ton of athletes invested in Hyper Ice, which is like the massage gun stuff, right? Because they use it, they like it. So it's like, get involved on that, but don't just invest, or don't just, throw money at stuff, or have a business partner say, hey, you got to do this. It seems good, blah, blah, blah. Like, actually build the relationships there as well. And that's what I've seen in NIL and like the college space so well, is some of these athletes, they're not just viewing like putting $10,000 in a company. Oh, maybe, in 5 years, 10 years, it turns into $100,000. Okay, great. I hope it does for you. Low chance to, statistically for angel investments. But why don't you go build a relationship with the founder or the companies? You don't know what opportunities he's going to give you, or her people, or he's going to introduce you to, or she, or whoever, those people are. And so to me, it's actually been like a learning curve as well, is like, learn from those people and use like who you are as an athlete, because people love athletes and be around them, and it's different perspectives. And athletes also, like, one of the biggest benefits is they're not afraid to ask any question. Like, I've learned that, like, I've always been that way, which has helped me, but I've also seen other people, because I know certain stuff now, and I'll see athletes be like, ask a question. And like, in theory, it's kind of like a dumb question or stupid, but it's not, because they make you, like, they challenge you and bring you back to your basics. So that would be the other thing, is like, don't be afraid to ask questions. Like, I'm sure I ask people questions all the time where they're like, I thought you like know finance or investment. How do you not understand this? It's like, well, break it down a layer deeper. So to me, that's kind of how I would go, is started learning through media, books, stuff like that. Then go to more passive stuff, stocks, ETFs, and then get to a little more active, like real estate, angel investments and stuff. And then if you get to a point where you go, okay, I've learned enough, I've met enough people, now maybe start your own ventures or your own, business type moves or own businesses, because you've learned from all the other verticals, and you've met people that can like give you ideas or money to start your own things. Because you also want to leverage. You don't want to just throw all your own money into everything. That's kind of how I go about it, and how I do go about it with some of these other athletes.
Well, I like what you're saying in terms of, because we always look at there's a lot of stories out there of pro athletes and NBA athletes and all the things that they're able to achieve. But at the same time, Russell Westbrook is able to kind of do what he wants to do because he's Russell Westbrook. But when you have guys who don't have as big a name, I know you've worked with some college athletes who are now, moving their way into pros, but they weren't really huge names, but have been able to leverage what they're doing into businesses and things like that. And I think that's what you were talking about with like overseas athletes. There's not this huge wealth of money. Some guys make great money, some guys not so much, but like having that ability to have these athletes still be able to invest and still be able to put their money towards something is a great advice that you just gave, which is just start reaching out. You know, you can't, it's, I think that's how I started. No one knew who I was. Me, people still don't, but like no one knew who I was when I got done playing overseas. And it's just like you just have to start reaching out and trying to make those connections. And I think that's something that athletes are afraid to do because we have this ego that like everyone should remember us. But at the same time, being able to put that ego aside and reach out is obviously one of the most important things you can do if you're trying to build some wealth.
Yeah, and most athletes, like, they're most valuable when they're still playing, whether you're overseas, you're in the NBA or whatever. Like, I see that's one of the big problems with athletes is they think, oh, okay, you know, I was this big time, whatever, let's use baseball, for example, big time pitcher. And then when I'm done, I'll go build whatever I want to build. But it's like now people are like, you're retired. So it's like actually maximizing some of that time where, yeah, it's harder work. You're still playing, you know, you got other things to worry about. But it's like leveraging that, like building, and that's where like the Kelsey's brothers have done a fantastic job. Like Travis Kelsey, I put out a post on him the other day on Twitter. It's like this dude, he probably has a few more years left in the NFL, but he already has like a top podcast and he built it all around while he's playing in the Super Bowl. And so he's built this audience in. So then when he's done, people will still be like, they'll still be there. So then he can do whatever he wants with them. But if he would start when he's done, people would kind of be like, you know, he'll maybe tell a few cool old stories. Like Ben Roethlisberger, I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. He has his own podcast, but like he's done. He should have started while he was still playing, so he could tell game stories and like real things. Here's what's going on now. Draymond Green's doing a great job with that. So that's also the thing is like you're actually still most valuable when you're still playing. And you know, the problem is too, everyone wants to look at the Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson or LeBron. I mean, I always say this, like it'd be a sad day if those guys ever were like poor. Like they can get in any opportunity, they can do whatever they want and people will buy it and or be involved in, you know, the best investments or the best real estate deal. So it's like don't focus on them. Like, yeah, you're gonna hear a lot of stories, but focus on the ones that were average players or maybe less known and are doing huge things and are talked about. Like Kelvin Beachum, great case study. Offensive lineman for the Arizona Cardinals. But he's built this whole like his whole image around like being really smart with technology and artificial intelligence. And he's made like, I don't know, probably 70 investments at this point. And it's like he's built up that brand of him and people know about him, which honestly helps him in his football career too, people knowing. But when he's done, he already has that. So he's good. He doesn't have to build that up when he's done. And then people are just like, ah. So I would focus more on those case studies as well.
In your experience, what are some of the most common financial mistakes that athletes make? And like, how can you avoid some of those pitfalls that athletes fall into? We talked a little bit about like some of these guys will never have to worry about money, but some of them will end up worrying about money. And what mistakes are those and how do you think they can avoid those mistakes?
Yeah, and obviously I'm not a financial advisor, so I'm sure some of them have great examples of like true, you know, see it face to face, you know, in person or see the whole meltdown. But some of the things I see or hear about peripherally is that you start like you think your earning potential is going to last forever, and you're making like a lot of money and you think like when you're done, you just had, let's just say you had a 15-year career in Europe and let's say you're doing really well salary wise, but then when you're done, like it in theory drops to zero and you also haven't been in like the business environment ever. So like you're basically going from whatever to zero. And because like you said, and you come back, people don't care as much about it, that you're just like kind of almost put in the same bucket as a 22-year-old coming out of college. And so to me, that is why you have to be focused on your NIL and building stuff while you're still playing, because then you get in these circles with these people that are maybe your age and you're growing alongside them. Hey, keep doing your pro thing, or here, let me get in this deal here. And those people remember you. So when you get out, all those people that like, let's say you're 25 and you're playing overseas and you're like messaging and building relationships with other people when they're 25. Well, when you're retired at 35 and they're, you know, 15, 13, whatever years into their career, you can now go be on their level because you built those relationships and you've shown like interest and curiosity, and they're going to help you find a job, or they're going to give you a job. You're going to build a company together. And that's why you have to do it. And so to me, that's not per se a mistake, but that's the opportunity cost of like, do you want to go almost all the way back to ground zero? Or do you want to like just stay where you're at with the top performers in business? That's how I view it, as like, to me, that's a mistake. And that's why you got to be building it while you're still playing.
And I mean, you're right. There's so many things that I think back on that I could have done differently when I was still playing. But we're in such a different age now. Like, I think about when I was playing, I mean, I had Facebook. I remember I looked at a post the other day and I was like, oh shit, like here's a post from when I retired. And it was on Facebook. And like 4 people liked it because I only had 4 people that I was friends with on Facebook.
Right.
And it's just crazy now that how leveraging that social media can create such a difference. Like everything is exposed now. The world is, you're exposed. So leveraging that is obviously a huge market of creating your brand and building your brand, especially overseas, where you kind of talked about that. Like, there's a lot of brands out there overseas, and that's something that if you are an overseas athlete, you have to start tapping into. And you talked a little bit about tapping into the kind of that market of the Indian athlete. Now, if you're just an overseas random player, how do you start tapping into the potential of a place that you have no experience in, no anything? How do you think, what advice would you give to someone who's trying to get overseas NIL money, but they walked into the country 5 minutes ago and now they are like, okay, how do I start?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's a tough one as well. So to me, it starts earlier than that, where like you mentioned, you got to be building your brand beforehand
Mm-hmm.
of here's who I am. Like, you don't need millions of followers. You don't need to be doing it every day, but you need to be, hey, here's clips from the other night. Here's me, out with the teammates doing whatever. Here's me. I like, I don't know, just make something up. I'm fascinated by Web3. Here are my thoughts
Mm-hmm.
on it, or whatever. And so you're building that brand. And then when you step into this country, to me, it's just like anything. Like when I lived in Boston for school, I would, even if I wasn't getting something to eat like all the time, I would go to this one restaurant and just say what's up to the guys in there, just because I was always like building the brand. So then, when it was Saturday night and we're out and I don't want to pay all this money, or I forgot my wallet because, we were out having a good time, like, oh, here's pizza, or here's whatever. So to me, it's the same thing as like you're building those relationships and those brands on the ground. And then on top of that, you have your social following. So you understand like what you like in these people. You understand relationships, people, etc. And then you just start trying to find those niche opportunities. And you start trying to say, like, listen, this is who I am. I'm Andrew Petcash and I'm playing in Lithuania. And this was my college story. Here's my journey. This is what I like. And you kind of portray that. And then it makes it easier to go and funnel and source opportunities. Now, it won't be easy, right? Like, if it was easy, everyone would do it. It's going to be hard. But it's like, do you want extra cash? And also, number two, do you want to be in a good place when you're done playing? Then you'll figure it out and make it happen. Like, that's my thing. Like, anyone that wants to do anything, like, if you want it bad enough, just like you wanted it bad enough to play college basketball and then to go play in Europe, if you want it bad enough, you'll figure out how to get endorsement deals and NIL money
Mm-hmm.
and leverage into a career. If you want it bad enough, if you don't, like, I've seen teammates, like, they had a great top 40 education at Boston University. They were great players, all league. Now I don't know what they're doing. They're on the
Mm-hmm.
streets or doing nothing. It's like if you want it bad enough, you'll go leverage into the next thing. And I think that carries over. Like, you use that same mindset that you have in basketball, sports, or whatever you're doing, and leverage that right into these business opportunities. And people will like that, and they'll catch on to it, and they'll like that energy and that vibe and that freshness. And because they'll be less stale than they're used to on the business side, and you'll thrive and you'll make it happen. That's so really the only advice is like, just go do it, which is, not great advice, but it's like, I can't tell you, everyone's situation is unique.
No, I totally agree. I think exactly what you said. And that's why athletes, I think, have such an edge when you look at employers who are looking at potential, applicants. having athletics, especially college athletics, on your resume is such a huge thing. Not to mention pro athlete, because they already know what they're going to get. They know that they're going to have that drive. And it's crazy because most guys that you and girls that you run into, they're like very driven, and they get done and they're like, okay, I'm going to continue to be driven. Like it's ingrained in your head. But every once in a while, like I know guys who just were kind of like, all right, I'm good. I played 15 years overseas. Like I'm chilling now. Like I'm taking a break. And it's like, well, we're not LeBron. Like we can't take a break because like our paychecks weren't LeBron's. Like we can't live off that for the rest of our lives. There's got to be obviously things that you can do. So I think you hit the nail on the head right there, that it's just going to take what you're willing to put into it. And
Exactly.
when you look at, and you've done posts about this before, which are my favorite, when you look at the role that overseas athletics plays in the future of sports, it's obviously a huge thing. And I've talked to some people on this show, investors and people that bought teams overseas. And I think the boom is coming. I think overseas sports are about to pick up. I mean, welcome to Wrexham was obviously huge.
Yeah.
People are starting to notice what's going on overseas, which is what we're trying to continue being a voice for. When you look at that, what role do you see it playing? Do you see the boom happening very soon? And what do you think will happen because of that boom in terms of like investment opportunities?
Yeah, I do really think it's about to start taking off big time, because we're now seeing this merging of really not, well, there's a few scenarios happening at the same time that's contributing towards this. And the first is being like ownership. Like everyone is valuing ownership more than anything, especially athletes and celebrities. It's why you see, even Snoop Dogg trying to buy the Ottawa Senators, and Magic Johnson buying the Commanders, and JJ Watt just bought into Burnley FC. What does he have to do with a soccer club in England, right? But then you mix in number two, that's where it is creativity. These athletes, like, they want to be like creative in their own thing. And because they have the social following, the audience, they can be creative. So it's like they're owning their own creativity. And because sports is really entertainment, that's where it's coming out. And I'm doing like a post on Asia tomorrow. I did a podcast and I wrote an article just about that's growth and that's acceleration. And it's really gone in like waves where in like the early 90s, satellites hit Asia. And so it went from like 4 channels to 40. And so they needed all this content to fill. And that's why the NBA came into Asia. And then now, though, we're gone to like the third phase, which is like they're building out their own leagues, and they're looking like Asian money is going to the US to invest in sports teams. They're learning, but then US money is going, hey, we already know how to do this. And they're coming to, in like Europe and Latin America and Africa and Asia and Australia, and they're putting their money. And so they're really just playing the same playbooks, but now there's a greater spin on it because it's all global and content is at the center of this. So you can use these athletes, retired or active, and you can tell these Netflix documentaries, or you can tell these social media series, and you can pin it all together. So yeah, I mean, if I'm looking at investments and I have access to them, I'm definitely looking at leagues and teams overseas. Not all of them, like not all of them are the best investments. I can't tell you which ones are or not. I haven't seen enough. But also I do know, like, we've seen the model work in the US. The US has 350 million people, and I get they have some global audience. When you go to Asia, there's 1.4 billion people in just India. There's like another 1.3 billion in China. They have like 60% of the world's population. You're telling me if it doesn't get big enough, you're not going to have super valuable teams and leagues and stuff. So to me, yeah, like to your point, I know it's like long-winded and all over the place answer, but overseas it's about to get really fun, in my opinion, not just for leagues and teams and investors, but also for players. Greater content for them, greater social media stardom, which means better endorsements, better NIL deals, which goes back to our point we've been bringing all along. It's time now to start just building your brand. You don't have to do it every day, but show who you are. People like that, and it's going to help you. I mean, you see Last Chance U on Netflix with the JUCO kids in basketball. Deshaun Heiler, he went from no one knew who he was to now everyone knows who he is because of one show, and it was lucky timing. But now you can, not artificially, because I would just say that's kind of artificial, but now you can like manufacture that on purpose. So for example, what I mean by that is if you're an investor, you have the right people, you can go into, you can say, we're going to do the same thing in an Asian basketball team or a team in Lithuania, and people will watch it and listen, and then you can blow up those players. And so that's like why I think another reason it's going to take off.
No, you're absolutely right. It is crazy how much emphasis is starting to go there. I know Kevin Durant, when he went, that was like a big eye opener because people have no idea. I always say you use the term overseas and it's such a vague word because you say, "Hey, I'm playing overseas," and everyone's like, "Oh," and you just accept it. Like no one asks a question. You're like, "Oh, I play overseas." Everyone's like, "Oh, cool, that's cool," but then people are like, "Oh." The follow-up question is, "Oh, what countries?" But overseas is just this general thing, so it's like a very vague term. So when Kevin Durant went over there, I thought that made it such a boost because he showed the crowds, he showed what was going on, he showed what was happening in this whole entire world, and it kind of blew people's minds because they weren't expecting to see the fandom. And I think the fans really play such a big role in investment opportunities. Like if you're not going to invest in a team that doesn't have a huge fan base, and I think European fans are way more intense than fans in America. And I'm from Philly. Like, trust me, I mean, this was the past 24 hours. What time is it? Yeah, about 24 hours. I guess that was over by about this time yesterday. Past 24 hours, people were going crazy. And it's just a very passionate thing. But having that fandom obviously increases the revenue and increases any investment opportunities when you're looking at overseas teams, because you have that high fandom. Anything that you put out there, I think, is going to be something that's going to sell.
Right. And you can build greater fandom now too with these documentaries or social media series, and you can, bring the athletes in, and it's interesting. It's a cool time to be involved in sports for everyone. There's a lot of opportunities, and athletes are going to benefit a lot of it. A lot of it. Yeah. And like you said, even one kid I played with on my team at BU, he's in Taiwan, and man, he's like, these games are crazy. Like the fans are awesome. Little kids, he's signing after autographs after every game. He's a star there in his little town in Taiwan. And we laugh though. Just a little side note, but it's funny because some of your overseas listeners will probably relate to it. He's playing in Taiwan, so obviously there's the whole concern that China might just come in and take over Taiwan. Last year he played in Ukraine, and Russia came in like while he was still playing there. So we're like, dude, it can't be 2 years in a row that you're in a country that gets invaded. I'm like, you're picking the wrong countries.
You gotta go. It is always, I remember every time like a contract offer came my way, especially like later in my career. Like earlier in my career, it was like Australia and nice places that are offering good money, and you're like, oh, this is safe. But once you start getting into those later years and it's like, hey, would you go to Syria? I'm like, what the fuck? Like Syria? Like, why would I want to go to Syria? I guess I'll go, but I mean, that's not really the best opportunity, but it is crazy when you think about it that, everyone's putting their.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I saw a crazy documentary. I'm sure you saw it maybe too. Marshall Henderson, he was one of my favorite players growing up from Ole Miss. And he was playing in Iraq. And I was like, what does this dude do playing in Iraq? Like, I thought like there's like crazy war, which also shows you that perceptions though too sometimes of these countries are just like, it's the propaganda of like the US saying, oh, these are dangerous, these are bad countries. And it's like, no, it looked fine. Like the gyms were full. Like, I don't know the full stories. I mean, one of my teammates, he played in Israel and a bomb like blew up right outside of his apartment. He was like, see ya, I'm done. And now he's a police officer though. And I'm like, you make no sense. Like you quit basketball because a bomb blew up, and now you're like going into buildings like in danger. Like I was like, you make no sense to me. I think you just wanted an excuse to be done with basketball or something. But anyway.
It hit him. It hit him like that. That adrenaline goes. He's like, I need to keep that adrenaline going.
I guess.
So with Profluence, like, how do you guys stay up to date with the latest investment trends? How are you keeping up and the opportunities that exist? And how is that something you're able to keep up with daily? Because you are at, like, when I talk about the cutting edge, I'll check out your newsletter, and all of a sudden your newsletter pops. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm hearing these. And then like a week later, there's like ESPN is reporting something. And I'm like, it's the same thing. Like, you guys are the cutting edge. You're the Wojs of the investment world, the athletic investment. How do you guys stay up to date with all of those different trends?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I have luckily now I've built out a few channels where I get like insider type information early, where it's
Nice.
whether it's agents or business partners or, just certain people like, hey, this is coming, or hey, we want you, like, now it's cool because people are like, hey, we want you to like break this. So I'm like, yeah, that'd be awesome. I'd love to do that. Which is nice. But then also I just have like some I do surf through like podcasts and YouTube, and I just try to, like, my whole thing with social media now, and I encourage others, is like I consume to create, in a sense. Like, I want to keep up to date with my friends or family. Like, okay, there's that side of it. I get it. But otherwise, like, you just get in these doom scrolls, or you use, it's not productive. Like, it's actually negative. And so to me, it's always like I'm just looking for cool things, or like trying to piece together, okay, how could I turn a story out of this, or how could I create? And it's more like, okay, and I do not follow this. Like, I'm bad, but like this is kind of my principle, is like, for every minute you consume of content, you should be creating for a minute. Now, I still probably
Wow.
consume a little bit more than I create, but like it's not a bad balance. And my thing is like, this is the greatest arbitrage opportunity of all time. If you think about it, I mean, everyone's on their phones. You go to the gym, all the kids are on their phone. You're on a bus or a plane, everyone's on their phones. So I'm like, well, what are they reading or listening to or watching? Content. So don't you want like that to be you, and you to leverage that, and to be that? So I see that as a good opportunity. Now, obviously, certain spaces are getting crowded, and it's harder and harder to stand out for a lot of things. And that's why, to me, it's like you got to be unique. So like for you guys, it's great. It's like, this is overseas. Like, this is, to me, it's all about the niches, right? Like, I want to own
Mhm.
the athlete investment niche. Like, to some people, they'd be like, that's stupid. Who cares? And then to a lot of people, they're like, this is interesting. Like, I want to see what athletes are doing
Mhm.
in business. Why are they, let me show me some bad ones, but show me some good ones. Break it down. And so for me too, it's even crazy because just with, running the business and having to consult and, keep, be able to pay the bills, there's even stuff that I want to do. I just like can't do all of it right now, where it's even more cutting edge, where like I'll see things right away. Like, an athlete makes a huge business move or has a crazy return, and I'm like, man, I should get a tweet or a video or something and put it out. But like, I usually just kind of do it. I just try to keep it more structured. But eventually I think I'll start to even get more up to date with stuff where it's like I usually see or hear right away. It's like, hey, like, because sometimes I get offered like, hey, you see this deal, you want to be in this deal with these guys. And so like I know it goes down, and then I'll see it like 3 months later, or hear, hey, they finally finalized it. And so I'll be like, okay, so I know these 5 athletes invested in this. But it's like, oh, I knew about that 3 months ago or whatever.
Well, this is what you're doing is incredible. Like you said, that niche market, you are doing a great job with that. I follow all of your stuff because for the athletes that we have who are, playing overseas, who are trying to leverage that into post-career success, that's something we are always like recommending you follow him, because he's going to keep you up to date with a lot of the latest trends and things that you can get involved in. So we appreciate you. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
everything you're doing, and you're doing a great job. And you could see the athlete in you continuing to work hard and be successful post career. So we're very excited that we are able to have you on today, and we thank you so much, Andrew.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, I appreciate it. And then yeah, for anyone listening too, like, feel free to reach out if you have any questions, or if you have a good story. Eventually, like, one of the series I want to build out, and I'll do it, but it's just not the right time yet, is just having athletes on to tell some of their business stories or their business mistakes. And I've had a few on. I've had like CJ Watson and Thaddeus
Mhm.
Young's coming, and Jimmer Fredette's coming on in a few weeks, like some of those. But like, I could do it at a greater scale and go into details on one story, or, go into a long hour-long thing with breaking down everything. So eventually we'll get there. But yeah, thanks for having me, Kevin. I
No,
appreciate it.
this no, it's great, and we appreciate what you're doing. Thank you so much, Andrew Petcash, Profluence. Check him out, and yes, this is great. So I appreciate it because I'm sitting there looking at everything you do, the investments and stuff. I'm like, oh shit, okay, like this is great, and it's just a success story for you, and we're excited to see what the future holds for you guys. So
For sure.
congratulations and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
This is the Overseas Famous Podcast. This is Kevin Owens. We'll see you guys again next week.